Is it finally time for Erik ten Hag to leave Man United? That's the brief discussion we're going to have today, because I have been maybe a defender of Ten Hag over the last 2 and a bit years compared to the average person on social media and in the normal media. Because since he's come in, there have been problems at the club in numerous different ways that he has had to deal with. And to be fair, I think for the most part, he's dealt with it relatively well. So individual players, there have been problems. For example, Jadon Sancho, where he held his authority and Sancho didn't respect it, and therefore he went out on loan. We had the Cristiano Ronaldo situation, which I believe the majority of people actually at the time felt that Ten Hag handled it very, very well. Once again, commanding authority, and Ronaldo just felt like a bit of a petulant child at the time, and so he wasn't going to be in the plans anymore. We had the Greenwood situation, which we won't touch on, but once again, dealt with. And you then also had a situation where last season, it was supposed to be, okay, second season, Erik, you won us a trophy in your first one. What are you going to do this time? Are you going to try and build on what you did, show us your patterns of play, bring in these players and make it all work? But they did have a big injury crisis, and it feels like no matter what manager was in there at the time, they would have struggled in the situation that United found themselves in. A few teams actually had those last season, and they didn't do as well as expected, which, for whatever reason, for Ten Hag didn't seem to be allowed as an excuse or anything like that. And he still managed to get Man United a trophy, despite them not being that great in the league and not that exciting. The problem comes with season number 3, which we are now in. Because at this stage, you have spent a lot of money, and these are now your signings. When you come into a new club, you've got to deal with sometimes dregs of what other managers have brought in, and maybe you can add a little bit to it, and sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. You've got to deal with what you've got. For example, when Graham Potter went to Chelsea, it was a mess because he didn't get the pre-season and transfer window and signings and everything that he would have liked, and so he had to deal with the chaos of Chelsea. You also had the same sort of thing with Poch when he first joined. Ten Hag had that issue, but it's now been 2 years. He's had multiple transfer windows to get rid of some players that aren't wanted, or he doesn't feel like fit what he would like in his squad, and he's had plenty of time and money and backing in order to bring in the players that he would like. And so we look at this list and you see who really has worked out here so far. So Anthony is obviously the most notable. What on earth was going on here? They were supposed to be able to get him for like half of this price, and how it ended up being as expensive as it was, no idea. But he is one of the biggest flops in Premier League history. That's not great when he is your guy. Rasmus Højlund. Maybe that one is a little bit too early to say. He is a younger player, and so spending more on him and him not being a flop so far is not the end of the world. We've got Casemiro for 70 mil at his age. Crazy. No longevity there. You've seen him have patches and spells where he's looked capable of playing, but then others where he genuinely looks hopeless, and how is he still at this level playing in your squad? It's crazy. Mason Mount for 60 mil was just not a good signing. They overpaid on him. They could have got someone like Maddison in instead for like 50% less. But it is what it is. Lenny Yoro is a kid. That one's fine. It's too early to say. Lisandro Martinez, 56 mil. He has probably been the best signing that has come in under Ten Hag. They do look like a better team when he is playing. Manuel Ugarte for 50 mil. For people that watch PSG and that kind of football, they say that this probably isn't going to be that great of a signing. You saw it immediately in the Tottenham game. I did a little bit of analysis on him before he made his first couple of games for Man United, and the main things that I heard and saw were that he's probably going to give away a lot of fouls. He'll run around a lot, but that's what you get from him. He's sort of like that bulldog in midfield, sort of like a Conor Gallagher-esque player, but he's not going to be the guy that is getting loads of assists and goals or anything. He wins you the ball back, moves it on, and that's the hope in midfield. But he, from the analysis and stuff, seems like he might be a little bit too slow and will give away too many fouls because of the pace of the Premier League. And against Spurs, they were walking past it. It was ridiculous how easy. So it is early, but still. Andre Onana, I think at times has actually been a little bit of a scapegoat, to be honest with you. He was terrible in the Champions League. He was the main reason why they went out of the Champions League. However, in the league last season, he actually wasn't that bad. He wasn't amazing, don't get me wrong, but he wasn't anywhere near as bad as he was made out to be. But this is a key signing because of the way you're supposed to be wanting to play. You're bringing in a goalkeeper that is supposed to be great with his feet, and you start by building out from the back. That is the first principle of Ten Hag's tactics or play style. We'll get onto that in a second. And it hasn't worked that well. A few times you've seen Onana creating the start of an attack, and it has been impressive. But he hasn't been consistent enough with his passing out from the back to make it seem like, wow, okay, this is definitely the guy. You compare him to someone like Ederson or Alisson, and you know exactly what you're getting, and they do the job very, very well. De Ligt so far for 42 mil has been very, very marmitey so far. You've got some ex-players and pundits and media saying that he's not been good enough so far, but in some games he has played well. He got slated on Monday Night Football recently, but is that a bit harsh? We'll see. Joshua Zirkzee for 30 mil is potentially an okay one. It is in conjunction with Højlund, and you would expect throughout the season, if they're both fit, then they're going to rotate. You got 100 mil worth of players there. Are you getting that value for money? We'll see. Mazraoui for 17 mil. They have had problems at fullback in this squad. As it stands, it seems okay. Malacia, I don't understand what this signing has been. What happened to him? Like, he had an injury, but then what? He disappeared. No one heard about him for months and months and months. So that's a baffling one. Christian Eriksen has had times where he's looked okay, but other times where, once again, a bit like what we're talking about with Ugarte, he seems a bit off the pace. So with all of this money spent, when you compare it to other teams that are spending big money, it doesn't seem to have been as good value for that money. You're not getting as much out of it. And you can't even really say that they've gone for like the Chelsea method of only buying youngsters for decent amounts of money that they should be able to get that money back in a couple of years. When you're spending like 70 mil on Casemiro, no. And so one of the big problems that you have in conjunction with this, and one that you'll hear all the time when you're looking at conversations revolving around Erik ten Hag, is style of play, patterns of play. What are they? What is the identity of this Manchester United team? And the problem has been so far in this 2 and a bit years, there hasn't been any of that. You cannot tell what this United team set out to do. For example, Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal nowadays under Arteta, Chelsea under Maresca, and even Pochettino last season. You can see what their game plan is. Do they want a fullback to invert in and therefore overload the midfield, and then they'll utilise those players to be able to pick little 1-2 passes and fill in the pockets and therefore attack through the middle? Or are they going to have wingers stay really, really wide, and that's how they're going to utilise their attacks? They're going to exploit that width? Man United, you genuinely don't know. It seems, since Ten Hag has come in, that their main play style or pattern that they have relied on is individual moments. Bruno saving the day. Rashford deciding that he's actually a decent footballer for one match and scoring a worldie. Garnacho scoring the crazy bicycle kick. There's no real tactician at note here. You can't tell what they've been instructed to do. I feel like one frustration that I really, really have with watching United under Ten Hag, especially this season so far, is you can watch one game and it feels like, okay, maybe they've got something here. They're getting the fullbacks on the ball as much as possible. They're pushing them really high up so that they can utilise them and the wingers to sort of interchange and provide that extra width. But then the next game they completely change it and they get battered. There's no consistency there. So, as I say, I think that since he's joined, Ten Hag has had issues to deal with. And those issues have been hard, but fair. And a lot of managers go through similar things. You come into a squad that is disjointed. You've had the ownership problems as well. Now you've got Ineos in, so that isn't really an excuse anymore either. All of the problems that were there, it seemed as valid excuses for what were going wrong, are now disappearing. And we've still got the same problems occurring game to game. There's no patterns, there's no consistency, there doesn't really seem to be fight. You've got someone like Christian Eriksen, one of the most senior players in the squad, coming out after their game against FC Twente, saying that the other team wanted it more. You can't have that in a squad that is supposed to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest and best team in world football. Has he lost the dressing room? Do they expect him to go? Who knows? You hear differing reports all the time because everything gets leaked at United. The problem is, at the end of last season, when Ineos came in, they did this review where they were actively, clearly talking to a load of other managers. And it seems they didn't find the manager that they wanted, or they couldn't get them at the time, so they stuck with Ten Hag. He signed a contract extension. Can you afford to get rid of him at this stage of the season, after you've just extended his contract, after you have basically said, yeah, there's nothing really better out there in the market, we'll stick with you? Does that not just show, again, a bit of incompetence there from the ownership if they make that decision, and so therefore they're forced to stick with him until at least the end of the season, and then they search for somebody else? Do they wait for a sacking elsewhere? Some people, including myself, like to see managers get given time. And you see it work with certain managers. For example, Arteta is a perfect example. First couple of seasons were pretty rough, but nowadays you see them competing. Yes, they're spending money, bit like United, but they're spending it a lot more wisely. Similar as Man City. When Pep Guardiola first came in the first season, he didn't win the league. It didn't look as good as it does now, and he's altered things over time and has took this team to a crazy level. Ten Hag has had a few years now, and there hasn't really been any improvement. Not just in positions in the league, but individual players. Some of them seem to have stagnated rather than improving. That's not what you want. You compare it to someone like Vincent Kompany, who was at Burnley, struggled, got relegated, has now gone to Bayern Munich, and is instilling his ideologies immediately, and they're working. Yes, you can say that they have a good squad of players, which they do, but it is still clearly his style of play. Another one, Hansi Flick, a very highly rated manager, went to Barcelona in the summer. Could Man United have gone for him? Did they choose not to? Who knows? But he's gone into Barca after Xavi and everything like that, and they're looking great. Really, really good so far. Instilling confidence in some players that in the previous few years didn't have it. Rafinha looks reborn under Flick, and he's only just come in. So, after 2 and a bit years, how are you not having that effect on your players and your squad? How are we still having to ask the same questions now that we were 2 years ago about what you want this team to be? How is it supposed to play? What are the patterns that we're supposed to expect here? Nobody knows what United performance you're going to get when you see them week in, week out. I'm a Leicester fan. we've drawn Man United in the Cup. It is crazy that I can say a sentence and this be true. Out of all the big teams that were in the draw, Man United are the one you want to get. Because you could beat them. They are terrible some days and great on others. You could genuinely get that terrible day and go through to the next round, even if you are a worse team than them. These other squads, they don't let that level drop anywhere near as much as Man United. Everyone will have seen all the stats, like last season, the amount of shots and chances they were conceding. It's crazy. A Man United squad should not be doing that. Simple as that. So is it time for Ten Hag to go? On the basis of things not improving or changing, you could be inclined to say yes. The problem is, they publicly searched for a replacement in the summer and apparently couldn't find one. So, what next if Ten Hag goes? That's the question that Ineos and anyone else with those kind of decision-making powers are going to have to ask themselves. I'm intrigued to know all of your guys' thoughts, so let me know in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.